By the end of this episode, you'll learn how desperation can be an important catalyst to transforming your career in medicine. Welcome back to another episode where I help younger physicians decrease stress and increase income by transitioning from corporate to independent practices, even without any business experience. In this episode, you'll discover how fair compensation is crucial to physician satisfaction and retention, the business strategy behind locum tenens that reduce stress while increasing income, and how a physician solved the problem of poor recruiting companies' practices by starting his own firm. Dr. Chaudhry, thank you again for coming on this podcast to share today about the business side of locum tenens, because you have a business that helps, I guess, physicians find locum tenens jobs. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks again for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So I started the business Locum Physicians United back in 2016. And the reason was because I felt that after working my first couple of locum jobs with other locum tenens companies, that I was being put in unsafe situations clinically, and also I was being grossly underpaid. Right. So I felt as if, like a physician, there's nowhere where I can go where someone can actually look out for me. Right. If I don't know the market rate in a certain area, I'm going to get lowballed. And if I don't know any better, I'm just going to end up having to take that. Right. So I started the business back then, and, I didn't know the first thing about starting a business. I remember I was complaining to my brother about this. I'm like, man, this is what the situation is. And I got grossly underpaid. And my brother is someone who lives in Silicon Valley, California, and has been very well entrenched in the sort of startup ecosystem there, and is an investor and things like that. So he's been around that sort of culture and for many years. And so, when I was complaining to him about it, he was like, look, dude, why don't we just start our own company? And I'm thinking to myself, how do you do that? Like, is that something we can do? We can just start a company, right? I want to tell people that I had zero inclination, desire, imagination that I'd ever be starting a locum tenens company, or any company for that matter. I had no desire prior to that. And so the necessity, they say, is like the mother of all invention, right? Like if you feel like you're kind of stuck your back's against the wall, you need to do something. Right. Yeah. And I looked around when I was working my full-time job, and I'm seeing people kind of like, stuck in the matrix and just, grinding away. And I'm like, man, I don't want to be here 25 years later and being in this type of situation. That's just not the type of life that I envisioned for myself, Mm-hmm. And so I had to do something. So I just started to learn, man. I didn't know anything about business. Like I said, I didn't know the first thing about it. So I probably watched hundreds of hours worth of videos on entrepreneurship, read many books about it, talked to my brother. I would go down to California to visit him and, visit like founders who he knew or he was investing in, just to try to get an idea of what is this all about. And really, to be honest, those visits actually really help expand my mind to what the possibilities are, because you meet young people who have started like $100 million companies that are changing the world in a particular niche that they're in, right?
Yeah.
And when you're in healthcare, you're not taught to like think outside the box. You train and you learn about how to take care of a patient. Like there's not much creativity involved. There's certain algorithms that if you follow them, you'll have a good chance of doing your patient good to their health. But outside of that, there's not a lot of room for creativity, right? So you just kind of go, you see your patients, you go home. So I remember having been exposed to this sort of entrepreneurship and the startup world in California. It got me like excited about like, wow, like we can do things that are just beyond the hospital walls and just create some value, right, in the world, and make an impact in a much more grand way. Not that we're not making an impact in the hospital. I definitely felt like that I was, but I wanted to have a more sort of macro impact than what I was doing. And so, that journey led me to just to start the company and learn more about. But and the thing for me is that I probably wouldn't have done it had I not had a partner, i.e., my brother, who had a complementary skill set. And so partnering up with someone who has a complementary skill set, i.e., my brother who knew finance, knew business, knew how to start a company, and so on and so forth. We kind of just were a very kind of good match for each other. And we decided to start a company, and here we are. We still have like the company, and we have a couple other businesses that we work on together. So it's been an amazing journey.
That's awesome. So this company is a company that helps physicians find locum tenens jobs. What exactly is the mission of the company, or the purpose?
Yeah, no, it's on the surface, or the nuts and bolts of it is that we're a staffing company. We're a physician
Okay.
staffing company. We are a locums company, but in the heart of it is more than that. It's, again, having gone through what I did when I started my locums journey as a physician, I wanted to create something where physicians didn't have to like guess, am I getting the right job with the right pay, with the right sort of like circumstances, right? I wanted to give our docs who work with me, like in the ER especially, or in the hospital or whatever, that we all get paid well for our services, because I believe that we all deserve better.
Yep.
Even if someone else doesn't believe that, I believe we do, because I know that the type of work that we do, and especially in the ER when you get spat at and you have drunk people coming in and having to like put them, sedate them, and traumas and left and right, and just it's just chaos, right? And so I
It's
felt
just
like
like it's just like throwing a football, right? Just throwing a
yeah,
baseball. I mean, it's very difficult
yeah,
to
it
do
looks
those
easy,
things.
right?
Yeah, sure.
I guess our job doesn't look easy, but
Yeah.
and it's not. But I felt like, look, if one of us doesn't take care of us, then no one else will. So I felt like
Yep.
I had to step up to the plate, and I had an opportunity to, and I was fortunate, so I did.
So, so if I were starting a practice and I had an office I needed to staff, or an urgent care I was going to staff, I would contract with your company to then find a doctor, or how does that usually work on the business side of things?
Yeah. So we partner up with hospitals or
So,
practices that have a need, and so they'll tell us, hey, we have a need for, um, you know, 5 FTE physicians, for example, that we need
mm-hmm,
starting, in 5 months, for example. And
mm-hmm,
so then we will go out and go to our network and see who has an active license, or someone whose skill set matches the need of that particular site. And then with people, when they reach out to us, we will, communicate their interest to the site with the
uh-huh.
CV. And then the site will say, hey, we approve of this doc, let's start the credentialing process. And then we'll facilitate all that, the onboarding and everything.
Yeah. And so what's a pricing for a business that's looking for a physician? Is it an hourly price, or a contract price, or how does that usually work?
There's various ways that it can be done, but the most common way is that we contract with the hospital at a flat rate, bill rate. So it's
Okay.
per hour.
Per
Again,
hour.
it is specialty specific. For example, a surgical or procedural specialty is billed a little bit differently. But generally, this type of work that that we're involved with hospitalist and emergency medicine, it's an hourly bill rate, and then for the hospital, and then there's an hourly pay rate to the physician.
Mm-hmm. So what would be the average cost to an employer, let's say a hospital or a smaller hospital system? Um, is there like a percentage above a number that you look at, or?
Yeah, a lot of it depends on what the bill rate is going to be based on, again, the site and the demographic of the site, like where it is geographically. Like, is it hard to get to? Like, does a physician want to go to this place or not? Right.
Yeah.
And then two, what are the nuts and bolts of the job when they get there? Is there going to be a lot of coverage? Is there not going to be a lot of coverage? Is there going to be single coverage? Are there going to be, what kind of resources are available in terms of what specialties and so on and so forth? So what I can say is the more difficult the place to get to, or the less desirable, and the job, I guess, level of difficulty involved in that, in terms of coverage, if it's less or more that's demanded from the doc, there will be a higher sort of premium that will be oftentimes billed to the hospital, just because to pay the doctor to go out to a place like that is going to, they're not, if they know what their worth is, they're not just going to go out there for a low pay rate, because right now it's a doctor's market, and they can take high paying jobs in places even very close to or within big cities. So if it's like a hospital that's kind of out there a little further away, because having done locums again as a physician myself, it would take a lot for me to go to one of those places, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Right. If you're
if someone would offer you, if someone's looking in Miami or Tampa, Orlando, those are heavy markets. I mean, those are busy markets. Would that then be a lower pay rate, or it would be average?
It can
or
be.
Like, okay.
It can be, yes. Some of those markets, like New York City, I guess Florida is mostly run by contract management groups. So I'm not exactly sure what their sort of internal structure looks like. LA, Bay Area, San Francisco, those type of places. Yeah, those rates tend to be a little bit lower than maybe just like slightly like in the suburbs or a little maybe within an hour out of those big cities. You can get a pretty good rate. Yeah.
And so when a physician is looking for a company to cover, or a hospital's looking, what other things are they looking for to choose that recruiting firm or that locum tenens firm?
From the physician perspective?
From the hospital perspective, or the urgent care or the office perspective?
Generally, they'd want to know, is this company capable, and what kind of reputation do they have in the industry? Right. Mm-hmm. So they would want to know if are they able to execute on the needs that they have, right? Do they have a pedigree where they've been in the industry for a little while to make sure that, they know the nuts and bolts of just running the business and credentialing and scheduling? Can they execute on some of the basics? And so once you've been in the game for a little while, people kind of know, if you've been around and you're doing well as a company, people kind of tend to know about you, and, they can choose that. But then, rate is oftentimes something that they'll use to determine which companies to go with. And sometimes, I've talked to several hospitals that are in some of those remote areas where it's hard to get a doctor out there. Mm-hmm. And they'll want to pay us. So meaning, the bill rate is much lower usually than even a lot more desirable areas. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, look, I can't help you because I want to send you a good physician. But any good physician who knows his worth or her worth is not going to take a lesser, like a pay cut to go to you. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So you like cheap, or, cheap isn't always necessarily like the least expensive, right? Getting a cheap doctor, it can end up costing you more. How is that? Well, the doctor comes in, maybe there's a reason why they're cheaper, right? Maybe they have some behavioral issues or some sort of like other things. And now a few months later, you're like, well, we can't stand this guy doctor, so we have to kick him out and start the whole process of recruitment again, right? Yeah. This happens all the time with facilities. And it's like, to me, it's mind boggling. I'm like, look, you can try to cut costs here of 10, 15, 20 bucks, but at the end of the day, like you're going to get, maybe not the right physician and then have to start the process all over again. Yeah. So I always tell facilities, or something like that. You catch a lawsuit or something like that. And that does happen, right?
Yeah.
So some facilities are pretty short-sighted in that regard.
Well, this has been a very informative conversation because I didn't realize there was such a niche for even locum tenens, because I thought you just applied to a locum tenens job or a recruiter that would find a place for you. But I think, you're right. If a physician is running a company, I would rather go to a physician-run company to find another job than some of these big companies, because it's
the hope is that physician is looking out for you, right?
That's true too.
That's the hope, and for me, I'm fortunate enough that I've posted enough jobs to large physician groups where they are starting to recognize me as the doctor who's trying to change the landscape for emergency medicine in terms of how we're compensated as a specialty, right?
Yeah.
And so,
what's your relationship with some of the bigger ER staffing firms that staff like the big hospital corporations? I don't know if I want to mention them. But particularly there's one that was bought by a large hospital corporation. 50% of it.
I look, it's for me, I try to be very careful with how, I portray myself. Like, I'm not here to put anybody else down or, whatever. I guess I am here to compete, right?
Yeah,
it's a free market, so may the best man win, right? So I'm here to basically do right by docs. And if in doing that, I can create a sustainable business that continues to grow, great, right? Everybody else has the same opportunity. Every contract management group or every other locum tenens company that's out there, they have the same opportunity that I have. As a matter of fact, they've been in the industry for a lot longer than me, so they have a lot more experience and money to invest to do the same thing. So I think the market is big enough, and there's I try not to get into sort of like conversations about what someone is doing that's right or wrong. Now, if there's something that I don't believe in, I don't have any problem saying that. I'm not trying to please anyone, but at the same time, it's a small space and healthcare and locums and all that. And so you never know, just maintaining, I think, a healthy level of respect for everybody else. And,
Yep.
if they're corporations, they're businesses, they're running it. And look, physicians have the choice. A lot of physicians will crap on CMGs. And I get it. I understand why, but no one's forcing you to work for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And,
like
and
no
you,
one
you
is,
and you've proved it. I mean, you're doing side gig on side gig on side gig, right? Where you've figured it out. You've done what's best for yourself. You've become independent, and you've started a business that is actually going out to helping other physicians. And I think that's super admirable because not a lot of people think like you. And I think we need a lot more people like you to help crack the matrix. So
I appreciate that. But, again, this was not something I ever planned to do. It happened because I was desperate. I was desperate for change. I was desperate for a different life. I was desperate because I saw that my next 20 years were going to look like if I didn't make a drastic change immediately. Right. And so I don't think most doctors are just comfortable being a worker bee, and they're comfortable enough. Right. Their level of discomfort with their career, their life, their situation is not greater than the effort that is required to change it.
Yeah.
So, it's what they call it, the golden handcuffs, right? Yeah. It's like you're comfortable enough. You're like, all right, do I really want to go out there and start something? And maybe I'll lose money. Maybe I won't. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't. I'm happy. It's okay. I'll just work for the next 30 years and try to retire if I'm still alive at 65.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a big if because of the rate of suicide in our career, and that's something that pains me every time I talk about it. But I think it's related to that apathetic nature, that nature of I don't want to do it, or they're so riddled with debt that they don't know how else to get out of it, as opposed to paying it off as soon as they could, so that they can have the ability to do the things that you're doing and to change really the world, change how healthcare is being practiced, especially in your specialty, because ER specialty is a high burnout specialty. Mm-hmm. High burnout.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's another topic that I've written about in my book as well, is that locum tenens is the antidote to burnout. And, it's again, it's the idea of, I think it was Medscape that did this study that, one of the biggest factors that causes physicians to burn out is this idea that they don't have any sort of autonomy or any sort of involvement in the decisions of their career. And I can see that because I lived that for, a few years. And so going locum tenens is a breath of fresh air. It's not perfect. Like the perfect scenario is if me and you were just sitting at home getting $1 million paycheck every month, not having to do anything. Like that's the perfect scenario, right? But
I can think of a couple. I'm not going to go there. Not today, at least.
But like that would be the perfect scenario where you sit in and do nothing, and you have like income coming in that's more than what you need, and you can do the things that you want. But you got to pick and choose, right? So, and I think a lot of physicians, the thing is, when you're working as an employee, you don't have time to think. You don't have time to just process and just like think about what it is that you're doing, why you're doing it, how long you want to do it. Is this the life that I want for myself? I remember that was one of the things that really made it difficult for me. I'm like, dude, I need time to just think and just reflect. Because when you're working as an employee, you're either, you're working an erratic schedule, or if you're working in the clinic, or if you're on call regularly, if you're, a surgical subspecialty, there's no time. And then on the weekends, whatever time you have is with your family, right? Certainly. And so you're just on a hamster's wheel, and you have no time to reflect on, is this the life that I want in 30 years? Is this going to lead me to what I want? And, 20 years pass by and you look back and you're like, where did that go? Right. Yeah. And so I really encourage physicians to reflect and sit down and just spend some time, whether it's on the way to work, turn off the radio, think about where you are today and where you're going to be in 20 years if you continue down the same path. And if you're happy with that, great. Right? Like just continue living, but don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Be honest. Have an honest conversation with yourself. And if it's not where you want to be in the next 20 years, then you have some work to do and some thinking to do, and you have some actions to take. Right?
Yeah. Do something about it. That's the key. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate this episode. This was more than I expected. So thank you for coming on the Independent Physician Blueprint, where we help physicians understand how to decrease the stress of this crazy profession that we're in, but the crazy profession that we love. And we want all our physician colleagues to succeed. So thank you. Thank you for what you do.
You're welcome, man. Thank you so much.
So what you learned today is how fair compensation is crucial to physician satisfaction and retention. So you really have to know your worth and don't undersell yourself. The business strategy behind Locum Tenens that reduces stress while increasing income, and how a physician solved the huge problem of bad recruiting company practices by starting his own firm. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you'd like to hear more, subscribe, follow in your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss an episode.